Hey, I'm RC, and in this video I'll be explaining how require and exports work in NodeJS. So those two concepts are used when you want to build a multi-file project in NodeJS. And it can be confusing at first, especially for those familiar with JavaScript in the browser. And this is because the way the browser handles multiple files and the way NodeJS handles multiple files is quite different. So let's say that my project has two files. There's player.js file with HP equal 10, attack equal 10, and then there's app.js with a server equal something and console log HP. So I want over there to console log the HP that was defined in another file, so accessing a file defined in another file. Now in a browser project, this will work, assuming that I have this in my HTML file. So if I do this, it's gonna load that file. I do that, it's gonna load that file, and everything will work. Now in Node.js, if you try exactly this, it will not work, and it will say that HP is undefined. So first, let's take a look at how the browser handles multiple files. So actually what the browser does is that in the HTML, whenever it sees something such as script equals something, it's gonna fetch the file, and it's just gonna replace this with the actual script content. And then it's gonna see, oh, app.js, it's gonna take that, place it there. And if you try to execute this in JavaScript, it will work. Everything is in the same scope, so no problem. So the thing with Node.js is that it does not have the script command. So in Node.js, you cannot do this. Instead, what you do in order to load another file is use require. So you could think at first that those two things are equivalent, but it's not really the case because require does not simply copy paste the content and place it like that, like what the script command does in the browser. It does a little bit more, and I'm gonna cover that. So in the Node.js engine, require is defined as a function that looks like this. So obviously the real function is a lot more complex than that, but that will be good enough to understand. So require is a function, you give him a link to the file, it's gonna read the file. So this variable contains the file as a string. Then it's going to define a dummy export variable. Now, why is it called export? There's no real reason to that, but it defines the variable export. It's gonna evaluate the content of the file. So eval is exactly the equivalent of copy pasting content. And finally, it's gonna return the exports. So now let's take a look at what would happen if I take this and place it over there. So at first we could think that it would actually work. We are here, we require this file, so it runs the content over there. And then we try to access HP. But as you will soon see, it will not work. Like if we define require as this function, then what happens is that we go over there, we read the file, so this contains this content as a string, and then we eval it. So it's the equivalent of this over here. So we define HP, but HP is defined locally. It's a local variable of the function require, so we cannot access it outside. So this is the reason why it will not compile. So if we want to access HP, there are multiple ways. The first one is to simply remove the var. So if we remove it there, it's going to be removed here. And what we are going to do is instead of declaring HP as a local variable, it's going to be defined as a global variable. So normally you don't want that because it's a global variable. There can be name collision and stuff. So this is not the good approach, but it's an approach that works. And similar to how in the browser you can do window.hp, you can do exactly the same thing in Node.js, except that instead of being called window, it's called global. I won't really go too much into the details of global and window stuff because it's not really the recommended way to do things. The real recommended way to do things would be to put exports over there. So over here it would be export.hp, and over here, let's call it player exports. So what happens here is that we call this function, we create a dummy export. The HP of that export is set to 10, and then we return it. So actually player export is equal to this over here, HP 10. And then we can access the HP with playerexport.hp. So in a real project, how the player.js file will look like most likely is something like this. So it will contain a class player with a constructor, then a bunch of functions and variables attached to player, and at the very end you will want to export it. If you don't export it, like I said, you will not be able to access it. So export player, and over here, this will contain this over there will contain the value export from the file. So if I do export player export.player, this will be equivalent to this over here, which is the equivalent of player, which is equal to the player class. So it's not only the function that we'll be able to access to, but everything attached to the player. So this is the way you export class in Node.js. So with what I showed, you should be able to make a multi-file project in Node.js. So what I will do for the rest of the video is try to explain a little bit more advanced concept with Node.js, the require system, and they are not really necessary in order to use Node.js, but it's still a good idea to know how it works. So one thing that could be tempting with the current model is that because we are only exporting one variable, which is the class, it would be a lot more convenient if we could just do exports equal player, and that way here, instead of doing this over there, we could just do equal player and console.player. But if you try this, you will see that it does not work. So the reason why it does not work is that the require function is actually a lot more complex than what I wrote over there. So what it is in reality is a lot more like this. So first of all, there's a caching system. So if you require the same file multiple times, it's not going to load it from your hard drive and execute the code multiple times. It's only going to do it once. So if it's part of the cache, which means it has already been run, it's going to return it right away. Otherwise, it's going to load it, add it to the cache, and then return the module. The other big difference is that instead of having the content of the file being evolved right away, what Node.js will do is that it's going to wrap the file content inside an anonymous function. And this changes everything. So what would actually happen if we do that with this file is that we will replace it over here. So yes, we modify the export, so we change the reference to player, but we only change the reference. We don't really change the content of module.export. It's advanced JavaScript, but basically doing this does not modify in any way module.exports. It just makes it refer to another variable. So in order to counter that, what you will see people doing is add module.export equal player. And by doing this, it will work, because if we do module.export equal player, module.export over there will be equal to the right thing. Now, one thing to note is that even though this works, if you try to do module equal export, something like that, then it's the same problem that we had before. Yes, we modify module, but we make it reference another object. And by doing this, we do not modify this module over here. I know it's kind of advanced, but long story short, if you want to export a single variable, you cannot do export equal the variable. You must do module.export equal that variable. So I guess that will be pretty much it about this video. I hope you liked it, and let me know in the comment section if there are other features of Node.js that you would like me to cover. See ya!